You are not going to believe this. Seriously, imagine Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin actually finding some common ground.
Yeah, right.
No, but really, not on some like shadowy backroom deal, but on something surprisingly fundamental. Stuff that could reshape the tech in your pocket and, well, national security.
What's fascinating right from the start is just how improbable it sounds. I mean, two countries seemingly locked in opposition, potentially cooperating on something as vital, yet often overlooked as rare earth elements.
Exactly. Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're unpacking the reported possibility of a U.S.-Russia partnership focused specifically on these rare earths. We've sifted through some compelling reports and analyses, including a pretty detailed breakdown from a story-driven English YouTube transcript just to bring you the essentials.
And it's really crucial for everyone listening to understand why this deep dive matters. These aren't just, obscure minerals tucked away somewhere. Rare earths are the silent workhorses powering your smartphones, the batteries in electric cars, even critical parts in defense tech.
Right? Think about your own devices, how much we rely on them.
Totally.
And here's the kicker. China currently has this dominant grip on the entire market. We're talking a level of control that creates a significant vulnerability for the U.S. and, frankly, many other countries too. So our mission in this deep dive is clear. Understand the core of this potential deal, what's driving both the U.S. and Russia, the huge obstacles in its path, and the potential knock-on effects across the global economy. And don't worry, we promise not to get totally lost in the technical weeds.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The reports we've looked at suggest these discussions reportedly took place around April 1st, 2025.
April 1st. Interesting date choice.
Yeah, but right away, the geopolitical backdrop just screams out at you, the ongoing war in Ukraine, the massive sanctions on Russia from the West. It makes this potential partnership seem, well, on the surface, highly improbable.
Unbelievable, isn't it? It's like your biggest rivals suddenly deciding to collaborate on a critical supply chain. But the reports, and specifically that story-driven English analysis, point to Kirill Dmitriev. He's Russia's economic envoy.
Right.
Who apparently confirmed that discussions with American companies are indeed happening. And this guy's likely pretty close to Putin's inner circle.
However, you should also note the silence coming from the White House. No official confirmation at all. Now, this could be deliberate strategic maneuvering, keeping adversaries guessing. Or it might just mean the discussions are still really, really early stage, tentative, perhaps.
It certainly adds a layer of intrigue.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the elephant in the room is China. This is really the core reason, isn't it, why this potential deal is even being considered?
Absolutely.
The numbers paint such a stark picture. China controls roughly 60 to 70% of the world's rare earth mining. It's staggering 85 to 90% of the processing.
Yeah, the processing is key.
And over 90% of the magnets produced from them. That level of dominance isn't just raw materials. It's processing, manufacturing, crucial components, multiple points of vulnerability.
That kind of control creates a serious bottleneck. For the United States, relying so heavily on a single foreign entity for such critical materials presents a clear national security risk. I mean, imagine if geopolitical tensions escalate further, China could potentially restrict or even halt supply. It's a risk many nations are now acutely aware of.
A real nightmare scenario for anyone who depends on technology, which, let's face it, is pretty much all of us now. Okay, so that's set the stage. Let's dig into what's actually motivating America to even consider this seemingly unlikely partnership with Russia.
Well, the primary driver for the U.S. is undoubtedly trying to reduce its dangerous over-reliance on China for these rare earth supplies. National security isn't just about military might anymore. It's also about secure access to the fundamental materials that underpin modern tech and defense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Russia, despite everything, does possess significant rare earth reserves. The U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, estimates around 3.8 million tons.
Right.
But it's interesting. Russian claims put that number much, much higher. That story-driven English source even highlights the Tom Demeter mine in Siberia. Potentially massive output if they can fully develop it. But given their current low production, how much weight should we really give those higher Russian figures?
That difference in estimates does highlight a key area of uncertainty, you're right. But even the lower USGS figure positions Russia as a potentially significant player. So from an American perspective, the possibility of U.S. companies investing in and developing these Russian projects offers maybe a dual benefit, securing supply and potentially creating jobs in related U.S. industries.
And you can almost see Trump's deal-making instincts kicking in, right? The story-driven English commentary, even admitting its bias, points out Trump's history of pursuing deals with, let's say, unconventional partners, always focused on what he sees as a win for America.
Yeah, that pattern fits. There's also the potential, and this is more speculative, for this to be linked to broader discussions around the Ukraine conflict. Maybe rare earths could become a bargaining chip in future peace talks. It adds another layer of complexity to think about.
Okay, so America's looking at this mainly to counter China, potentially leveraging Russian resources. But what's in it for Russia? Why would they be interested in teaming up with the U.S., especially given the sanctions you mentioned?
Well, for Russia, access to American technology and, crucially, American investment is a major draw. They might have significant reserves, but their ability to actually develop them efficiently and at scale has been hampered by, frankly, a lack of modern tech and capital.
That makes perfect sense. The story-driven English source mentions their mining sector still relies on some pretty outdated Soviet-era technology.
Exactly. So partnering with American companies could provide the necessary expertise and financial backing to modernize their extraction and processing. Plus, cooperation in such a strategically important sector might offer Russia a pathway, however narrow, to easing some of those tough Western sanctions that have really hit their economy.
They're but a thaw through rare earths, perhaps, a potential diplomatic lever.
Potentially, yeah. And Russia also has ambitions to become a significant player in the global rare earth market by, say, 2030. Currently, their production is tiny, less than 1% globally. Teaming up with the U.S. could seriously accelerate their progress towards that goal and, interestingly, also reduce their own long-term reliance on China.
Oh, interesting point. It's not just the U.S. looking to diversify them.
Right. And the story-driven English analysis raises another, maybe more strategic motive for Russia. By offering the U.S. an alternative source, they might be trying to complicate U.S. relations with Ukraine, potentially weakening American support for Kyiv. It's a complex strategic angle to consider.
Okay, so we've got the motivations. But as you hinted, the geopolitical landscape is tricky. Let's get into the major hurdles, the challenges that could completely derail this.
The biggest, most immediate challenge is obviously the ongoing war in Ukraine and the deeply strained U.S.-Russia relationship. The existing U.S. sanctions against Russia pose a very real obstacle to any substantial economic cooperation, especially in a sensitive sector like critical minerals.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine U.S. companies making huge investments in Russia while sanctions are tight. The legal and financial risks would just be enormous for them, right?
Precisely. And let's not forget Ukraine itself. As that story-driven English source points out, Ukraine also has its own rare earth reserves. Their potential role in the U.S.'s broader strategy can't be ignored. A U.S.-Russia deal might not sit well with Kyiv at all.
Definitely complicates U.S. foreign policy. And then, of course, there's China. How are they likely to react if a U.S.-Russia deal actually starts moving forward?
Oh, China will almost certainly view this with considerable concern. Any move that threatens their dominant position in rare earths will likely face resistance. They might retaliate through trade or leverage their control over other parts of the supply chain. It sets up a potential three-way dynamic, a power play that could really shake up the market.
A three-way chess game. And beyond geopolitics, are there practical challenges? The commentary mentions skepticism about Russia's actual capacity to ramp up production significantly.
That's a very valid concern. Russia's historical underperformance in this sector, despite having the reserves, raises serious questions about their ability to become a reliable, substantial supplier anytime soon. Overcoming those tech limitations, attracting enough investment, it takes time and serious effort.
And we should also touch on environmental concerns, shouldn't we? Mining and processing rare earths can be messy.
Absolutely. Russia's environmental regulations and enforcement might differ significantly from U.S. standards. Ensuring responsible, sustainable development would be a crucial and potentially difficult part of any partnership. It would need to be addressed upfront.
Okay, let's dig a bit deeper into Russia's current standing. We mentioned the reserve estimates, USGS versus Russian claims. What about their actual production right now?
As we noted, it's really low, less than 1% of global output. That story-driven English source really hammers home the legacy of Soviet tech and lack of investment. Sites like Tomater have huge potential, but realizing it needs massive upgrades, infrastructure, likely foreign investment, and tech transfer.
Are there any existing Russian players who might be involved?
The transcript mentions Rosatom's Silicum's magnesium plant. It's a current but small-scale producer of finished rare earth metals. So some expertise exists, but it's clearly nowhere near the scale needed to challenge China globally.
Okay, so potential on the ground, big hurdles above it. What about the U.S. side? Where do we stand on reserves, production, and import reliance?
USGS puts U.S. reserves around 1.8 to 1.9 million tons. The story-driven English source mentions sites like Hells Creek in Wyoming, though it correctly revises an earlier, much higher estimate down to a more realistic 7.5 million tons of oxide. Keeping those figures grounded is important.
Crucial for a clear picture, yeah. And current U.S. production.
Mountain Pass in California, run by MP Materials, is the only active U.S. rare earth mine right now. Production is increasing, hit around 45,000 tons of oxide concentrate in 2024. That's significant outside of China, but still not nearly enough to meet U.S. domestic demand.
Which means we're still heavily reliant on imports, mostly from China, as we said.
Yeah.
Really underscores the urgency for the U.S. to explore all alternatives, including this unconventional Russia route.
Absolutely. The U.S. is definitely pursuing a multifaceted approach, but this potential Russia partnership is clearly one avenue being considered to cut that import dependence.
Now, the story-driven English analysis also briefly mentioned this potentially broadening beyond just rare earths. What other economic areas might be on the table, however unlikely?
Yeah, the transcript mentioned aluminum, Arctic energy projects, even that stalled Noir hydropower project. Russia has significant resources there, and there were some past discussions before current tensions.
Right. I remember some early talk about Arctic energy years ago. It seems like a lifetime now.
Exactly. But honestly, the current U.S.-Russia trade volume is tiny, and sanctions plus the whole geopolitical climate create massive hurdles for any large-scale cooperation beyond potentially critical stuff like rare earths.
So while broader cooperation might be floated, rare earths are probably the main focus due to that immediate strategic need, especially regarding China.
That seems most likely, yes.
Let's circle back to China's dominance then. How could a U.S.-Russia deal, even if successful, realistically impact their control, given those huge reserve and production numbers you mentioned earlier?
Well, even if Russia ramps up significantly with U.S. help, China still holds the largest reserves by far, around 44 million tons, according to that source. And their existing production capacity, processing infrastructure, magnet manufacturing, it's just unparalleled. Those are massive advantages.
Those numbers really are stark, highlights the scale of China's control.
However, a successful U.S.-Russia partnership could introduce a significant new competitor. That could lead to more supply chain diversification, potentially stabilize prices somewhat, foster more competition. It wouldn't dethrone China overnight, not even close, but it could weaken their grip and reduce the leverage they currently hold.
So, chipping away at dominance, not dismantling it quickly. Now, importantly, the U.S. isn't just betting on Russia, right?
Yeah.
What other strategies is America pursuing to secure rare earths?
Oh, definitely not. It's a multi-pronged approach. Big efforts to boost domestic mining and processing, like the Mountain Pass expansion and potential Wyoming developments. Plus, there's a strong push for R&D into substitute materials that need fewer or no rare earths. That could drive real innovation.
And recycling. Recovering them from old electronics and stuff. That's gaining traction too, isn't it? Creating a more circular economy.
Absolutely. Enhancing recycling tech and infrastructure provides a valuable secondary source, reduces the need for new mining and its environmental impact. And crucially, the U.S. is actively building partnerships with allies, Canada, Europe, Australia, Japan, through things like the Mineral Security Partnership and the Critical Minerals Act, trying to create more resilient, diverse supply networks.
Okay, so the potential Russia deal, if it happens, is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The goal is a secure, diversified supply overall.
Precisely. The overarching aim is to avoid over-reliance on any single source, whether that's China now or potentially even a ramped-up Russia later. Diversification is the key strategy.
Okay, finally, let's bring in the experts. What are analysts saying about this whole potential cooperation? Feasibility implications.
As the story-driven English source notes, views are pretty divided. Some analysts see it as pragmatic, maybe even necessary, to counter China's dominance, even if it means dealing with a difficult adversary. A calculated risk, you could say?
Like an enemy of my enemy situation, purely strategically?
In a strategic sense, perhaps. But others are highly skeptical. They point to the huge geopolitical risks, especially with the Ukraine war, and Russia's shaky track record as a reliable partner. The Institute for the Study of War, for instance, suggested this could even be a Kremlin tactic to undermine U.S.-Ukraine cooperation on minerals. That's a perspective to consider.
And the Carnegie Endowment, mentioned in the analysis, basically says sustainable U.S.-Russia cooperation in any sector, including rare earths, likely requires peace in Ukraine first.
Right. They highlight all the hurdles, sanctions, the deep
Hmm.
trust deficit, conflicting objectives, massive logistical challenges in Russia, and likely strong political opposition within the U.S. itself. These are huge obstacles.
So it's fair to say the potential benefits are clear diversifying supply. But the path through Russia is packed with uncertainties and risks.
Absolutely. The geopolitical landscape is dominant, and international relations are just unpredictable. It makes assessing the long-term feasibility really difficult.
So wrapping up this deep dive, this potential U.S.-Russia rare earth deal is super complex, huge strategic implications. It offers one possible route to diversify critical mineral supply away from China, a major goal for the U.S. and others.
But, as we've laid out, it faces massive political, economic, and logistical challenges. The Ukraine war, sanctions, deep mistrust, these are significant obstacles you just can't ignore.
And there's still just a ton of uncertainty. Will it even happen? If it does, can it be sustained? Can it really shift the global market? The geopolitical winds could change everything overnight.
Indeed. And while this potential partnership gets headlines, it's crucial to remember the U.S. is pursuing many other strategies simultaneously. Boosting domestic production, developing substitutes, recycling, working with allies. This multi-pronged approach suggests they know relying on just one new, potentially unstable source isn't the best long-term bet.
That's a really important point to keep in mind. So as you think about this potential alliance, maybe consider this. Which strategy, domestic efforts, allied partnerships, or this controversial Russia deal do you think will be most effective long-term for securing rare earths? And what might the consequences of each approach be for the global balance of power and ultimately for the tech and industries shaping our world? Definitely something to mull over.